You're probably looking for a rogue build that can do something like this. If you're someone who clicks on build guides and skips ahead to the part of the video where you just copy and paste the skills, Paragon board, and aspects and then try it for yourself, I promise you, give this video a watch through. Because today, I'm going to teach you the penetrating shot rogue build. More importantly though, I'm going to teach you how to find success with this build. Now, for the purposes of this video, I've realized through my previous build guides, I could sit here and talk for 10, 20, even 30 minutes about why I've chosen the skills I have, what influenced my Paragon board choices, but those things aren't what's going to help you find the most success. So today, I will be focusing on purely the how behind this build. How to play it, how to gear it, and how to fall in love with it. But before I get ahead of myself, below in the description, I will have a D4 planner link to all the skills, my Paragon board, and the legendary aspects that are utilized in my build. Not only that, but here's a pan of my in-game skills, Paragon board, and gear so you can pause and copy in-game if you'd rather not go to an external website. Now I want to address what has changed in this version of build if you watched my previous build guide. So, Blizzard disabled Edge Masters, and this is a big deal for the previous build. With that build, I would take more utility focused skills because we were incentivized not to be below a certain threshold of energy. But now that the aspect is disabled, I've made the following changes. I moved the aspect of corruption to my crossbow to amplify the benefits, and I've added accelerating aspect to my ring. Then for my skills, I swapped from poison trap to cold imbuement. Let me explain why. Now that we don't have to worry about waiting for our energy to be as high as possible in between shots, we can use penetrating shot as often as we want. But hold on, I don't want to confuse anyone, and I've gotten this comment quite a few times, and I want to address it right now. If you have energy problems with this build, it's probably because you don't have resource generation on your jewelry at all, or you don't have any additional maximum energy on your gear, period. It also could mean your gear isn't built right in general. Since level 60 when I began running this build in different variations, most of the time, normal enemies die in one use of an imbued penetrating shot. If they're elites, it can be 2 to 3 shots depending on their affixes, but since I'm able to kill enemies so quickly, I'm not having to spam the ability. Another thing, to follow this build, you need to run combo points. This basically ensures that you're going to have a baked-in period between penetrating shots each time you're looking to use it. I always try to follow the same exact skill ordering. I activate an imbuement, use puncture 3 times, then shoot my penetrating shot, then puncture 3 times, use another penetrating shot, and move to the next imbuement. With this type of a rotation, energy should not be an issue. And this is a good segue point to talk about my gear. The secondary stats on your gear are very important. The reason I'm hitting for 1 to 2 million with my penetrating shot is because of the multiplicative damage that I'm gaining from secondary stats. So if you guys know anything about me, I like to keep my videos straight to the point. So I'm not going to run you through all my gear here and sit and talk about every single stat line. I'm going to talk about the general things and the most important things you want to find on certain pieces of gear. So one thing that's very important for this build, on your helmet, you're going to want 4 ranks of either shadow or poison imbuement, and then a maximum energy roll. That maximum energy roll, like I mentioned earlier, is going to help a lot with making sure you always have energy to use pen shot if you're doing the rotation properly. Then for my chest piece here, you can see this one is purely defensive focused. I have damage reduction, poison resist, total armor, damage reduction from close enemies. In my opinion, your chest and your pants are not meant to give you offensive properties. That's what your helmet, your gloves, your boots, your weapons, your jewelry, that's what that's all for. But you need to not overlook defensives if you actually want to push further into the end game. Then for our gloves, the 3 most important things you can find on gloves are attack speed, crit strike chance, and 3 ranks of penetrating shot. It could be 4, but I got unlucky and got 3. Then for that 4th line there, I would actually want to have lucky hit chance. Then, like I mentioned, for pants, you want purely defensive stats here. Some good ones are total armor, damage reduction, dodge chance, damage reduction from close enemies, and etc. Then for our boots, I'm running Penitent Greaves myself, and I think that's a really good option for this build. But if you can't find these, no problem. The most important stats you're going to want on your boots are going to look something like this. You would want movement speed, you would want some dodge chance, you would want some dexterity, and stats of that nature. The most important one on your boots, in my opinion, is the movement speed. Then for our crossbow, the best in slot stats, and my bow here is not best in slot, by the way. You want to make sure you're going with a crossbow because crossbows have a guaranteed vulnerable damage stat line, as you can see. I'll show you here with another crossbow, as you can see here, vulnerable damage. But going back to mine, you would ideally want vulnerable damage, dexterity, core skill damage instead of my basic skill damage, and then critical strike damage with imbued skills. That last line there could just be a raw crit strike damage roll, so keep that in mind. Then for the first dagger, Condemnation is a great thing to use in this build because, like I said, we are using combo points. And then for my second sword, I have crit strike damage, so that's why I went with a sword because those come with another baseline stat of crit strike damage. Then I have basic skill damage, dexterity, core skill damage, vulnerable damage. Again, similar to my crossbow, I would want to change that basic skill damage into crit strike damage, but beggars can't be choosers. Then for my rings, I have crit strike chance, crit strike damage, imbued skill damage, and then critical strike damage with imbued skills. Now, like I said before, if you are struggling with energy, one stat line you could get here to help would be resource generation. Also a stat line that I don't have on this ring, for example, vulnerable damage is another great thing for both of your rings. And then moving on to our amulet, I would ideally want marksman skill damage. I would want some ranks in exploit. You can actually get ranks into passives on your amulet. I've gotten pretty unlucky so far. But me personally, I really like getting points into malice or exploit because the scaling percentages on those abilities is really nice. Then you can see here, I also have imbuement skill cooldown reduction. That's a very nice stat line to have. You also could get resource reduction here. And then anything that sounds good for offensives on your amulet is what this piece is designed to do. But there you have it, nice and sweet. That's the gear. Let's move on. If you skipped ahead of the gear part at all, this build will not be as effective as you see it shown in my videos. The secondary stats are really important. So now that I've discussed how the build works and what gear is required, I really want to break down what I'm doing to play this build to its highest potential. For the actual gameplay part of the penetrating shot build, here's 3 principles that you should keep in mind at all times while you're playing. First, understand your imbuements. Each of the 3 imbuements have their own specialty. Like for example, Shadow is great for AoE situations because of the explosion. Poison is exceptional in single target encounters because of the damage over time. And Cold Imbuement is a great general imbuement for some crowd control while still benefiting from the damage increase from our imbuement-focused Paragon board. Principle 2. You should group enemies as tight as possible. With Trick Shot Aspect, the 2 additional arrows that are shot off of Penetrating Shot have this amazing ability in conjunction with imbuements to explode an entire pack if they're clumped tight enough. And for Principle 3, probably the most important, always use Penetrating Shot with maximum combo points and imbuements. You should never be shooting a single penetrating shot that isn't imbued by combo points and an imbuement skill. I like to think of this build as a bit of a dance. The dance goes like this. First, activate an imbuement, then 1, 2, 3 puncture uses, use Penetrating Shot where the highest density of enemies are, and repeat. Now, those are my 3 principles, and following those principles will help you find a lot more success with this build, but that's not all I'm going to show you. I'm going to walk you through some scenarios of a nightmare dungeon and do my best to explain what I'm doing along the way. Alright, so we are in the Nightmare Dungeon now, and the first thing I always do when I hop in is I'm going to activate Shadow Imbuement. Most of the time at the start, you'll be fighting trash mobs, so like I said before in the other video, oh, you know what? I'm going to need sound for this, because we have the most annoying affix in the game here. We have our beautiful friend, the Spinning Disc of Doom, who already went off, and please let me back in. Okay, we're good. So anyway, I have my Imbuement on right, and you can already see my cooldown's reset, so now I'm going to have an extra, basically 2 free skills to use my Imbuments on. So I'm going to start clearing a little bit, get deeper in here. And as you can see here, my big thing that I like to do a lot is try to put myself in between enemies in a way where my pen shot's gonna hit the most enemies possible. It's gonna be so hard for me to commentate this with this affix, but this is a good dungeon to do it with, so we're gonna stick with it. So here, I want to clump up enemies as much as I can because we want to try to get pen shot through as many as possible. Shadow Step out of the CC, get in this. Shadow Imbuement for some clear. Boom. Cold imbuement for some CC, peel me. If you guys are at this point in the video as well, as you can see, I recently hit 96, so hit me with a congrats in the comments below. I'm just very comfortable with the dance that I have to do with this. Like, it's basically, I'm always thinking the same exact thing as I'm going through this dungeon. It's imbuement, 1, 2, 3, shoot. 1, 2, 3, shoot. Imbuement, 1, 2, 3, shoot. 1, 2, 3, shoot. And so on, so on. All right, so here I'm gonna want shadow, because I can see we have a lot of trash mobs. 3, shoot. 1, 2, 3, shoot. You can also see I'm kind of orb walking to make sure I'm kiting well. Like, you can shift left click to use your basic skill. So I walk, shift click, walk, shift click, walk, shift click. That's why I'm so good at using puncture, is because I've gotten orb walking down pretty well. So like, you know, I can do this, this, this. It's basically orb walking. If you ever played like League of Legends or a previous Diablo title, you're very familiar with it. But if you're not, it's a little bit challenging to get down. And if you would want like a whole video about orb walking, feel free to let me know in the comments below, and I could absolutely do that. It is a little bit of an advanced mechanic, but once you get it down, it's not that hard. And it makes builds like this, where you're ranged, a lot easier to play. Okay, I'm going to Shadow Step to stun this guy here. Go Poison for my damage. Anytime you have an enemy that has that affix on them, it's called Suppressor, you're going to want to Shadow Step on that enemy, because you want to make sure you can kill them as soon as possible, so you don't want a chance you're going to miss your penetrating shot. Moving on, we have our boss fight here, and I'm going to start with Poison Imbuement, then 1, 2, 3, Poison, 1, 2, 3, Poison, 1, 2, 3, Shadow, 1, 2, 3, Shadow. I'm out of energy here. This is a bit of a problem. Boom, we're good. 1, 2, 3. Shadow Step, 1, 2, 3, cold. Oh, don't have energy. 1, 2, 3, done. So again, there are periods, especially if you're like me and you don't have resource gen on your rings, where in boss fights you will need to play carefully for a second and like kite around while you're waiting for your energy to come back. But generally, like you saw there, wasn't too big of a problem. All I had to do was Shadow Step to get a little bit of space, play relatively safe for a second, and I was good to go. Boom, there we go. I could absolutely go more into depth into some of the things I'm doing to find success with this build, but there's a lot of subjective parts of build guides that are really hard to account for. If you do have more comments or areas I can help clarify and advise you, leave a comment. I try to do my best to get back to every comment, and since you've all been so supportive, I want to offer as much help as I can. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed, make sure you're subbed so you don't miss an upload. But anyway, that's going to do it for me. My name has been Valued, and I'll see you in the next one.